Hi and welcome to this video where I'm back on the Renault Laguna 2, which is a 2007 model, and my wife is saying that the car's banging when it's going over potholes. So this time we've got genuine Renault parts, because I did change these back in 2019 and did do a couple of videos on it, and the mileage back then was about 125,000. It's now done 160,000, and if those parts have failed already, that's a pretty short life. So we'll try genuine Renault this time, and hopefully the weather will hold off and it'll be dry, and I'll try and do a quick video on changing both of these on this Renault Laguna. So hopefully you'll enjoy that, and thank you for watching. So we need to break the wheel nuts loose on both rear axles and then chock the wheels and release the handbrake. So I'm just going to chock these wheels so that when I take the handbrake off, the car's not actually going to start rolling anywhere. So we will need to release the handbrake, and on the electronic models the procedure is as follows. So we need to insert the key card and then just make sure the ignition is on, like so, and then it's a case of pulling the lever and pushing the button at the same time. You'll have an alarm go off and it will actually say the handbrake is now off. There's also a backup and emergency handbrake release lever that's inside the glove box, which in theory you should be able to pull, and it does the same job. Okay, so with the handbrake now off, we can actually break the wheel nuts loose with a 17mm socket. We obviously could have done that just before taking the handbrake off, but the chocks will hold it there for me anyway. So I'm just going to prep that, get the jack ready there, and I will need to go around to the other side and just do the same. Now ironically, actually trying to undo the wheel nuts with the chock didn't work as well as planned, so I probably should have undone them when the handbrake was on. But I managed to get the chock in there just to hold it enough so I could undo those. Okay, so the rear axle now is off the ground, so we can work on this side by taking the wheel off. So with the wheel off, we can now clearly see the coil spring, the shock absorber, and the rear axle there in blue, and also the axle mounting bracket, which contains the rubber bush, and the rubber bush that is in purple in this photograph. So we'll have a little bit of a close-up there, just so that we can actually see this bush and which part has got to be removed. So I've done a little bit of swapping around here, so I've got an axle stand there which will free up my trolley jack because I need to take the weight of the axle. So we can now unbolt the rear shock absorber and unclip the ABS sensor wiring. So using an 18mm socket, this might actually be quite tough. So you'll probably want to put a bit of plus gas or WD-40 on this to try and help undo it. And as you can see, this one's quite rusty and is probably near to needing replacing. So, right, so that bolt is out, so that's going to allow the axle now to drop down somewhat. Just emphasising there some of the rust, but that's nice and free. So we'll just unclip this ABS sensor wire, because once this axle starts to come away from the car body, we don't want to break this wire and give ourselves another job to do. Okay, so we can now mark the relative position with paint of the mounting plate to the vehicle floor and remove the 4 bolts securing the rubber bush and the brackets. So assuming that I've already marked it, which I did last time, and I can still see the marks, we can get on and remove this bracket now. So this is the main bolt going through the bush, and for this you'll need a 12-point socket, which is 16mm. Now when I first saw this, I sort of panicked a bit and thinking, what type of socket would that be? And it's just a standard socket, but a 12-point one. So that's the main bolt out now for the axle. So in theory the axle would actually now slide backwards if you were to pull it. But I'm going to remove the other bolts. Now these are all 16mm as well. But you might find some of them are actually quite jammed in, because I think the thread protrudes on one of them, and so you get a lot of corrosion and debris sticking to it. And this is the bolt in question. That's going to give me a little bit of a nightmare. So what I'm going to do is cheat here and use some air tools to just wind it backwards and forwards until it becomes free. Obviously I don't want to force it, because then we might ruin the thread and give ourselves another problem. So I'll just keep spinning it in and out, and there it is. So you may need to just be a bit careful on that one. Thankfully the other ones came out okay. And now everything is loose, apart from the bracket. Just needs to be unclipped from a black pipe. I presume that's a little pipe going to the fuel tank. Might be a breather pipe or return or something. So I'm just going to clean the base now under the car, so that nothing causes a problem there. And then if we're very careful, we can lower the axle like so, which will reveal the bush that we need to change. And there it is. So we've just got the job now of pushing that bush out and putting a new one in. So I am going to mark the ears of the bush, because it does have like a couple of, there's a metal plate on the top there, and so I'm just going to mark that. And then what we can do is take a quick look at the bush removal press tool I'm about to brake. So do not over tighten beyond 100 Newton meters. So let's have a look at our set, and the first thing you'll notice on the lid is it says 100 Newton meters maximum torque, and also you must grease the thread. So this is basically how the tool works. You have two of these, one pushes in and one pushes out, and you obviously use the central part in both cases. And that's our high tensile thread there, which needs a 21mm socket. Now I really advise you use a torque wrench and set it to a maximum of 100 Newton meters so you don't snap that thread. So looking at the two bushes, we can see one is oval and one is circular, and the oval one goes on the near side and the circular goes on the off side, if you're in the UK that is, with a right hand drive car. Okay, so now we can set to and remove the old bush on the right hand side of the car, which is the offside here in the UK. So here's a quick photo showing how the setup would be for pushing out the bush, and please note that your bolt thread will be a lot longer than this one. Okay, so it can be a bit awkward here space wise, because you've got to put this part on, which is like a cup piece, because the bush is going to go inside that as we push it out, or we will be pulling the bush into this part. And then obviously you've got to get the thread on, so that's my push out piece, which will go at the bottom. So the threads must be very heavily greased. It's one of the most important parts of this, is that you really must grease the whole thread along the whole length. Now we've then got to get that thread in there, which can be easier said than done, because I don't want to move the axle too much because it's still attached on the other side. I suppose if you did both sides at the same time, you could just drop the whole axle and that would give you a lot more space. But I'm trying to just do it one at a time, so it can be a bit awkward, but you can get the bolt in there, and it is in there now. So you've also got this bar here that sort of gets in the way a little bit, but again you can sort of get it in there and it all just fits if you're careful. Okay, so we've got the right former on there, so it's now just a case of tightening this, which will take that bush and put it into the cup section on the top. So I'll try and show all this. I'll speed it up a little bit, but I want to try and keep some of the footage in there so you can actually see the way the bush rises into the cup. So it's nearly out now. Yeah, nearly there. There we go. So it's actually not too difficult. Now I should actually note that the tool actually does say that this bolt thread may not be suitable for removing the bush, and that you should actually use other means to remove the bush and just use this tool for putting the bush in. Because of the fear that if it's locked in there, you may exceed 100 Newton meters trying to get the old bush out if it's corroded itself in. So just be aware of that. So this is the bush with the circular hole. So I'll show that. So what we're doing now is give it a nice good clean up with a wire brush, ready for the new bush to go into. Okay, that's dusted off. So fitting the new bush, and now you'll see why it's important not to over tighten that bolt thread. So again, here I'll show you the setup for pushing in the new bush or pulling in the bush. Now what I'm going to do is just mark on the bush where that metal plate is in relation to the bottom, so I can just try and maintain the alignment of things, because that metal plate obviously sits on the underneath of the car onto the body. So I'm happy that's roughly where it's going to go. And what I will do is put a little bit of silicone grease on here just to help this slide in, which in theory would take the pressure off that thread, so you don't break it. Because obviously if you break the thread, it would make putting the other side in a little bit more difficult. Okay, so that's in. Now I actually tapped this in slightly with a hammer, and I've also learned a lesson on that one, and that is if you hit that top plate, there is a risk it will actually come off because it's only spot welded on. So although I was trying to assist the installation here and speed things up, it's probably best just to do it with the actual installation tool. Okay, so this is the correct part that goes on the top there, and then we get our bolt thread back in again, and then this time the cup goes on the underside, and we will be pulling the bush down and into the cup. So ironically, this actually went in quite easily. There was actually no problem getting this in, and with the spanner it was basically in no problem at all. As you'll see, it was going in okay. A few turns on the spanner and it was actually home and dry. And I think I was tired and cold. As you can see, it's in, and for some reason I carried on turning. I don't know why. I seem to think that the ears on that lower part had to go right down to the car, and they don't. And then I used an extension, and that really put some tension on. A lot of tension, over 100 Newton meters of tension. And here's a replay just to show that. So it did go quite nicely. I'll slow that down just so that we can really enjoy my silly mistake. So we need a new thread now somehow, and obviously we don't have the thread for the other side. So in hindsight, it was a cold, wet and windy day which was taking its toll on me. But it does show the importance of knowing when to take a break and refresh yourself to minimise accidents from happening. So now in a somewhat sombre mood, I'm now going to clean the threads on all the bolts before refitting everything back together on the car. So this is the long bolt for the main bush. Give that a good clean. Okay then. So we can now start refitting the rear axle back. And like I say, I'm in a little bit more of a sombre mood now after breaking the tool that I need. So it's a case of now trying to align things back up, which can be tricky. You may actually find a bottle jack comes in handy with this, just because the trolley jack can take the weight of the main axle, but you sort of need to tilt from the back of the axle just to get things lined up, as you'll find out. So I did use a bottle jack just to try and help on it. So I'm going to just loosely get all my fixings back into position, like so. Now, like I said, I have put a bit of copper grease on all of these in the hope of them coming out easier next time. So you need to line this bracket with your paint markings that you should have made, and then using a 16mm socket we just need to tighten all this up, get the bracket back in, and then obviously get the other bolts back in as well. So now we can start to try and line things up. So just remember, this is the funny one that needs a 12-point socket. I think it has caught a lot of people out. At first, when they see this, they think, well, what sort of specialist socket was it? But it is just a normal one. So 18mm socket there for the suspension. Just tighten that for the moment. So that will just hold things a bit. Now you can see I've put the bottle jack there now just to give me a flatter angle for tightening this long bolt back in. So I'm gradually winding it all back in bit by bit. So, and then we need to obviously torque it all. And I'm just going to give the final tightening to this central main bolt. So that seems tight.
Ow.
And then we just need to re-clip that black pipe back on. And then we can get our torque wrench. So that's set to 105 Newton meters for both these bolts. Obviously we've only undone the top one, but it's the same for the bottom one. So tighten that. And then it's 80 Newton meters for the 4 bolts underneath the car. So we'll just pop under here. So I'm going to start with the central bolt. There we go. Double check that. And then I'll swap over to a normal hexagonal socket for these final 3. There's our click. Our second click, and then finally the third one. So hopefully this is going to stop the banging that's going on when you go over potholes. Obviously I've still got the other side to do, so we mustn't forget to pop our ABS cable back in like so, and that should be basically job done on this side. Just checking that spring hasn't come loose or anything. I'd left my socket on there, that would have been interesting. And then quickly give the brake disc a little bit of a clean, just in case I got any grease on it. And then it's a case of just get that wheel back on. So we'll speed this up. Yeah, quite heavy. And then that's a 17mm socket. And these are all tightened to 105 Newton meters. So now I need to just juggle around a bit so I can get my bottle jack back. Like so. And get this side back on the ground. So we're going to get our torque wrench now, set that to 105. And make sure those are all tightened in a cross diagonal manner. So now it's just a case of flip the car around, and then tomorrow hopefully the weather will be better. because this was pretty, it was a pretty sort of cold, windy day, this one. So I'm hoping tomorrow will be better. So I have to do the other side. So we're all lined up now. So we can go inside and start to warm up and think about our broken bolt thread. So anyway, so here's some reference photographs now, which you can pause to view for longer. So here we can see those two formers for the out and the in on the bush, and that's their position relative to the bush. And there's the circular hole for the one that we've just done. And here's a final close-up of that circular hole. So you've been watching Removing Offside Bush on a 2007 Renault Laguna 2. And thank you for watching, and I hope this video helps you repair the bushes on your Renault Laguna. This video was filmed and edited by me, Mark Savage, in October 2021, and I can be found on Instagram and Facebook as Coats and Gators.